Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles. How do you like the new intro, by the way? I know somebody isn't going to like it, but I thought that a 20-second intro was a bit too long for World of Warships. Don't worry, I'm not changing the World of Tanks intro. It's got togs in it, so it can't possibly be too long. I realise that sounds like a contradiction in terms where togs are concerned, but god damn it, they're my videos, I'll do what I want. Anyway, speaking of my videos, welcome to World of Warships in 4K, for those of you who can watch it in 4K. Scaled down to whatever resolution the rest of you are comfortable with on YouTube. Anyway, the current season of Ranked Sprint in World of Warships seems to be very, very popular, and for good reason. For a start, it's Tier 9, so there are no carriers to ruin everybody's fun. And secondly, it's Tier 9. I realise that's technically the same as my first point, but there are so many great ships to play at Tier 9. There are some ships that are not particularly well suited for this 3v3 ranked sprint format. Ships like the Rune or the Zhao, which work best when they're allowed to kite from extreme range, probably not going to do too well on these small scale 3v3 ranked sprint maps, but ships like this, captained by Charles Tucker, the German Tier 9 battleship, the Frederick the Great, is a solid choice. And the reason it's a solid choice, well, there are multiple reasons. As we already mentioned, these ranked sprint maps are on the small side, so the inaccuracy of the Frederick the Great's guns at long range isn't really an issue here. Plus, it's got a ton of armour, a ton of health, and it's got great long-range secondaries. And when you do get uncomfortably close to the enemy, which is probably going to happen sooner rather than later on these small sprint maps, it's got that amazing German hydro, which basically functions like an extremely long-duration short-range radar. Ships like the Neptune up ahead, possibly not a great choice, thanks to its bad even for a light cruiser armour, although it does have a smokescreen, which is useful under most circumstances, just not when you're trying to use that smokescreen within radar range of a Dmitry Donskoy. He appears to have realised his error, and he's angling against the Donskoy, but he's turning in towards the Donskoy, which is going to keep him, well, inside radar range for one thing, but it's also not really the Donskoy right now that he needs to worry about. And it's not even the Alaska B, because turning in like that has given his broadside to the Sovietsky Soyuz, who wouldn't even care if he was angling anyway, because 16-inch shells, terrible British light cruiser armour, and the team are down one Tier 9 cruiser already. Charles has his secondaries already, even at this range, working over the enemy Alaska, with his main gun batteries focused on the Dmitry Donskoy, but, well, the Donskoy disappears. So for the moment at least, Charles has nothing to shoot at, and that's when the friendly Alaska has a plan, at least in his mind, so cunning that you could pin a tail on it and call it a fox. I'm sure he thinks that by driving forward into the enemy Alaska and Sovietsky Soyuz, he's keeping the island on his right between him and the Dmitry Donskoy. But the Dmitry Donskoy is also using that island to work his way around the Alaska's flank without being shot at. The problem for the friendly Alaska is that he doesn't really have an awful lot of choice, because if he tries to turn away so that he's not getting shot at by all three enemy ships at the same time, he's going to have to give broadside to the enemy Alaska and the Sovietsky Soyuz, and he's almost certainly not going to survive that. Of course, he's probably not going to survive this either, but, well, at least he managed to take the enemy Alaska down with him. Unfortunately, his problems are only just beginning, because he's now run into the wreck of the enemy Alaska, and his guns are all pointing at the Sovietsky Soyuz. And even the battlecruiser like the Alaska's guns aren't going to do too much damage to a bow-tanking Soviet Tier 9 cruiser. He might be able to do some damage to the Dmitry Donskoy if the Sovietsky Soyuz hadn't killed him, but of course his guns were all pointing in the wrong direction anyway. So that means Charlie Tucker here is now the last man left alive against two enemy ships. However, he does have Gunter Lutjens as his captain, and he's just scored 100 secondary gun hits, which means that the secondary armament expert skill has just activated. So all of these secondaries are now firing 15% faster. He's got the nose pointing in towards the Sovietsky Soyuz, and he's given the broadside to the Dmitry Donskoy, who's closing to what appears to be suicide range, which can only mean that he's hoping to finish him off quickly with a torpedo launch. So Hydro is up and running, and our friend Dmitry is now on such low health that Charles is happy to leave him to the tender mercies of the secondary gun batteries, and yep, sure enough, there are the torpedoes. Now, I don't know how confident the Sovietsky Soyuz is feeling, but that's an awful lot of broadside that he's giving to a German battleship armed with 16-inch guns. And sure enough, there goes Dmitri, secondaries working as advertised. Charles is forced to turn in here in order to avoid the torpedoes. But he's not turning in so much that he's given a flat broadside to the big Russian. And it's here, at close range, where the German ship excels and the Russian ship does not. Don't get me wrong, the Sovietsky Soyuz is a tough ship, but it doesn't have that turtleback armour scheme that the high-tier German battleships have, which makes them pretty much invulnerable to being citadeled the closer the range gets. Something that is definitely not true of the big Russian. He absolutely can be citadeled regardless of the range, which is why, of course, he's paddling backwards as fast as he possibly can and taking shots at Charles's turrets, trying to knock out his guns and buy himself some time. Charles also aiming for the Russian battleship's turrets because he knows he's not going to penetrate the belt armour at that kind of angle. Ivan, however, has a bit of a problem because he's backing up into an island, and if he turns to avoid driving himself into the island, he's going to expose enough belt armour that Charles will be able to penetrate it. What Ivan doesn't appear to realise is that because his team is ahead on points, if he was to go for the ram here, killing both ships, he'd win. Because in ranked sprint, you win if you have more points than the enemy team at the point where there are no ships left and the match ends. Ivan has, however, been doing remarkably well with the gunfire into Charles's turrets because he's managed to permanently disable one of them, and he's busy lining up his 16-inch gun batteries for another salvo, which is going to do exactly the same thing to his one remaining forward gun turret. They are now both permanently disabled, and he only has his rear turrets and his secondaries. Sensing victory, Ivan guns the engines. This, however, is going to give Charles's rear turrets perfect broadside shots right into his citadel. And at this kind of range, even the Frederick the Great couldn't miss, and that was a lot of damage. But it's at this point where the Sovietsky Soyuz makes a serious miscalculation. You see, it's natural to want to turn the ship to keep the gun barrels pointing at the target. But because he's still moving forward while turning, he's doing two things. He's increasing the angle of the belt armour that he's shooting at, which means he's never going to penetrate it, and he's also continuing to show a nice flat broadside for Charles to shoot at instead. And as we've just seen, unlike the Frederick the Great, at that range, the Sovietsky Soyuz can definitely be citadeled. So, I mentioned earlier that there are certain ships that are probably not particularly well suited to this particular iteration of ranked sprint. I mentioned the Zhao and the Rune as examples of ships that really do, well, they do better when they have the freedom and space to stay at long range and kite, something that doesn't really happen on these small ranked sprint maps. Other ships, like the Yugamo for example, Japanese torpedo destroyers in general, with the long reload on their torpedoes, they're probably rarely going to see the opportunity to get a second load of torpedoes over before the battle is basically over. The Swedish destroyers, sorry, I know we're supposed to call them pan-European destroyers, but let's be realistic here. The Swedish destroyers, on the other hand, and some of the German destroyers, would probably do very well, as would the USS Benham, with its ridiculously large and fast reloading torpedo load. British light cruisers like HMS Neptune here, well, we've already seen what happens when one of these ridiculously badly armoured cruisers gets shot at by a battleship. And a Wavian here, from the Gnome Clan represent, woohoo! He's clearly feeling a bit brave. He's definitely got his man pants on, and he's taken a double dose of brave pills because he is taking the Neptune into Tier 9 3 versus 3 ranked sprint. I'm not saying that you can't take a suboptimal ship into ranked sprint and do well. I'm sure there are people that are doing well in the Zhaos. I'm sure there are people who are doing well in the Yugamos and the Runes. I'm just saying it's more of a challenge. And the challenge when you take the Neptune into ranked sprint in this season is hoping that they don't have any battleships. And a Wavian here from the Gnome Clan certainly appears to have rolled a natural 20 on at least this occasion. There are no battleships, just 2 cruisers and 1 destroyer per team. Just taking a quick look at the team composition. Well, the good news is that a Wavian's team have a Z-46, the German Tier 9 destroyer, with exceptionally good hydro and very useful fast reloading torpedoes. The bad news is that Awavian's other teammate is in a rune. The enemy team also have one radar, which has just been activated. That comes courtesy of the enemy USS Buffalo. But it's an early hydro from the enemy team that's doing the damage right now. That appears to have come from the enemy Neptune. And of course, if Awavian in the Neptune over here has been hydroed by the enemy Neptune, that means the Z-46 has too, which means that this is almost certainly going to be followed up by a radar from that Buffalo before too long. In the meantime, the friendly Z-46 has popped his own hydro and has just spotted the entire enemy team. It does seem likely, however, that thanks to the proximity of that hydro, the Buffalo's going to hold on to his radar until the hydro expires. Meanwhile, Awavian about to prove that not all Neptunes are created equally. Look at this. How can that Neptune possibly have been taken by surprise? I mean, Awavian's hydroed. It's the Neptune's hydro that had him spotted coming around the corner of the island. The enemy Neptune tries to pop his smokescreen, clearly not realising how hydro works. As the friendly rune, while hydroed, sails around the corner of an island right in front of that lot and eats a whole bunch of Benham torpedoes. Just think about the implausibility of that scenario for a second, because those torpedoes were spotted well in advance, long before the rune came around the corner of the island, because the Z-46's hydro was running and the torpedoes ran right past him, and yet somehow the rune still managed to sail into all of them. Unlikely though that may be, it's nothing compared to what the Z-46 is about to do. He's still hydroed, now by the Buffalo, and he's picking this moment to come out from around the corner of the island in front of not just the Buffalo but also the Benham. And he's shooting at the Buffalo. Oh God, no. Why? Why do they do things like this? Which of course means that Awavian, who's already killed the Neptune, is now going to have to kill both of the other enemy ships in order to stand a chance of winning this battle. And the Buffalo, let's not forget, is a heavy cruiser. And he's a heavy cruiser who's about to go undetected as he slides into the smokescreen that was so pointlessly and thoughtfully deployed by the Z-46. With teammates like this, who needs enemies? Well, Awavian's got enemies, 2 of them, and thanks to his hilariously incompetent teammates, he's going to have to deal with both of them himself. Now he knows that he needs to keep the island between him and the Benham and angle in and pray against the Buffalo. But it would help if the Buffalo would give him a nice big fat target to shoot at and stay still for a few minutes. So the Buffalo gives him a nice big fat target to shoot at and proceeds to stay still for a few minutes. God damn it, who put that island there? These Buffaloes are so hard to steer. Oh, hang on a second, here comes the Benham. And where there's a Benham, there are lots of torpedoes. Now those are a bit hasty and it's not going to be too difficult to dodge them, but the Benham is circling around and popping smoke, which means that he's getting ready to launch all of the torpedoes from the other side. Luckily, the Benham is moving too quickly to stay in the smoke, and he's telegraphed his intentions to Awavian enough. Oh, it's going to be close. Yeah, we were never really worried. He has managed to kill the Buffalo in the meantime, and then the Benham, presumably also not really understanding how hydroacoustic search works, has decided to sit still in his smokescreen, presumably quite baffled as to how he can possibly be getting shot at when he's inside a smokescreen and waiting for his torpedoes to reload, and appears to be relying on his 2 rearmost 127mm pea shooters to dig him out of this hole, which is entirely of his own making. Newsflash, they don't. 1 Neptune, 3 enemies, no problem. I hope you're enjoying Ranked Sprint, folks, and I hope you enjoyed today's video, because that's it for today. As always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.